My initial impressions were I thought it was a great concept, first of all. Is it an interesting story, right? That's just sort of the baseline of anything that interests me. Is the story good? So I love sci-fi and don't get a chance to do it a lot, so that was a big bonus for me. I had such a great time working with Roland on Midway that it was an easy yes to say yes. Also, I felt like this role was different for me in roles that I've done lately. But my first impressions of the script were that I love that it took this huge. I love that it took this huge disaster film idea, but really base it around one of the most interesting and controversial questions of evolution versus creation. And so for me, that was really fascinating to me. I like when you can use a movie, even a big splashy popcorn movie, to at least just drop something into the conversation. I think that's really fascinating. It's hard to sort of fit this into the Roland canon, other than yes, it's this big epic movie that he knows this space. He's not afraid of the scope of a movie. No set or piece is too big. Like he rolls with it. That's actually when he gets really into it, because he's got such a vision in his head that we're all trying to just hold on and figure out where he's going with it. But I think above all, the one thing that if I can relate this to the other Roland movies that speak to me are, yes, you can have this big spectacle, but you really have the human emotion that drives the story, because you have to have people that you care about. And that is something that you see a through line with his movies, especially the ones that become these big successful films, that because they can cross over just from being a big popcorn movie to go, I really loved that performance. I loved that character. I felt so much for that character. So he really likes to bring out that emotion. So from that perspective, you really do see these different storylines that each have such a tremendous amount of heart. The nuts and bolts of the movie are the moon is coming towards us. We don't know why, and it's left up to the astronauts who have an experience, me being one of them, that 15 years ago was up there and saw something crazy extraterrestrial, and caused a fellow astronaut of mine we lost him. So I carry that guilt, being the captain of the ship, and over the course of the film, as the moon is coming towards us, we don't quite know what the moon is. Is it a planet? Is it something built? If it is, who built it? And what is this impending doom threatening the world, our world? So, astronauts, even though I'm out of it, astronauts have to go back in and figure out what is the problem, and all is not as it seems once we get up there. That's the cleanest version I can tell of a script that's very long. Present day Brian is in a pretty terrible place. Jobless. He's trying to hold on to his past and of his knowledge of being an astronaut. Clearly a very smart person, but probably a little more of a rogue scientist than a typical by the book guy, which is how he differs from Halle's character. She still has a government job, and he resents that, and he carries a lot of guilt for what happened at this failed mission several years ago, which got him out of NASA. And you see his marriage is broken, his relationship with his son is broken. Then you see his son get into some trouble. Brian wants to do anything he can to help his son, but he just doesn't have the capability. Everybody that's given him favors, they're running out. Like he's trying and failing over and over and over, and has a lot of personal problems and demons that he can't overcome. I know I'm a father of two boys. Mine are younger than Sonny in this film, but I think every parent can relate to that. I think the thing about Sonny and his relationship with his father is no matter what the reasons are that your dad is AWOL, doesn't matter to a kid. Just doesn't matter. So you understand Sonny's point. You weren't there. You're not around. And I think and he's constantly just let him down because Brian has his own issues that he's fighting through. So Sonny can't see the good for what he does, and that's part of being Sonny too. You know, Sonny is not he's not the most straight-laced kid either, and that's probably a little of his dad that's rubbed off on him, and that's why they butt heads. And so this entire film for them is trying to just find how they can communicate, and how their relationship can move forward. To me, that's one of the most interesting relationships in the film is Brian's to Casey's. And Casey, so John Bradley plays Casey Houseman, and he is this very alternative, some would say wacky scientist who, you know, holds meetings in hotel ballrooms, and not that there's anything wrong with that. But he's, yes, his theories are very outlandish. The reality is, Brian is he's the only, in our movie, Brian is the only one who has seen what's up there and what is this impending threat, because his other partner, Marcus, spoiler alert, does not make it in the first few minutes of the film. And Halle's character does not see it, so she has to trust my word, and she doesn't at the time. And that is a major source of contention between those two. So Brian harbors this secret of what he saw up there, which he couldn't even wrap his head around because it was some alien life form, and it was horrible and terrifying and something he's never seen. So naturally, when no one else on earth can believe him or doesn't want to believe his stories, the guy that's giving the most outlandish theories, which is KC, there's just something there that it's like, you know what? I bet this guy would believe me. That's the crux of this, of Brian, is no one believes him, no one trusts him, because it does seem so outlandish, and it doesn't help that he always shoots his mouth off and shoots himself in the foot, so that's not helping the cause. And I think he carries a lot of resentment towards Fowler, towards Halle's character, because, and I can't knock it, you know, she wanted to continue on with her career, and they moved up in the world, and he, felt really betrayed by that. If anything, I came in with too much knowledge of what it's like to act like you're floating, because I did that for an entire movie, which helped, I will say. But yeah, you know, it's always tough. It's always tough to pull that off, because you're concerned. It's not even the movement of getting through something. It's when you're talking and doing a scene, and where you know, any astronaut will tell you your hands naturally fly here. Of course, if I did this in our scene right now, it would feel sort of odd. So you're trying to find that balance between what looks right and what's realistic, and we're not making a documentary and all of that kind of stuff. But it for sure is a much different feel. All these apparatus, you know, the apparati, all these things that we use to try to pull this off, it can be pretty difficult. I didn't do too much training in that, although the spacesuit we did a couple, about an afternoon in trying to get used to, because they are incredibly cumbersome and heavy. And my apologies to the people who make them, but they are not great to wear. What to say about Halle Berry? For me, you know, one of the things coming into this that I felt like was going to be difficult is Brian being very, very angry with her, because she has such a warm and welcoming face, to say the least, that you want to get along. You want there to be chemistry, and which of course there is, but So if anything, trying to work in how we were angry with each other became more became harder to do, because naturally we're both, I feel like she's a very giving actress. I feel like I'm a giving actor, so you want to be there for that person, whereas these two characters are just done at the beginning and don't want to deal with it. So if anything, I'm fighting against your instinct to be like, oh, it's Halle Berry, I've always wanted to work with you, this is going to be so fun. Then it's like, oh no, I have to tell you I don't like you or trust you right now. So that was, I guess, a little bit of a journey. There is a wonderful thing that films can do, no matter if they're a tiny independent movie or a huge spectacle, which is engage in conversation, which is can make you think. Maybe it can change the way that you look at a certain subject. Maybe it can open your mind, even if it's not some heart-wrenching drama, even if it's a big, fun, splashy spectacle. And I think this movie can do that, and does that in a couple different ways. I think it does bring up the fact that, and it's no secret with the creation of AI and the worries of machines rising against you. I mean, Terminator dealt with it. But there is an increasing fear that is very real. You know, I think art imitates life, and I think that in the science community, I think that is a legitimate fear of, if we create something so much that takes over, that has such power with our increasingly technological society, what does that mean? So this movie raises that.
I think one of the reasons I really wanted to do Moonfall was because it related to the odd times in which we find ourselves living in with this COVID pandemic. And I think normally big disaster movies like this are movies that people seem to gravitate towards. I think they can see themselves in them. We all have this fascination about the end of the world and what would that look like and how would we live through that? Would we live through that? And because the pandemic is so much, I think, a part of our everyday life right now, a movie like this sort of resonated with me in a different way. I thought it would be more relatable now than ever before within, the constructs of our life right now. I had one conversation with Roland in the early days. It was very quick. We talked about the movie. You read a movie like this and you really understand what it's about. It's pretty easy to understand. So we sort of had a meeting of the minds. And originally this role was written for a man, though I do know that. And so credit to Roland for taking a character that was male and then realizing that this could be a female character and still have the same impact. I describe Fowler as wicked smart. I think she's a woman who survived in a man's world. You don't become an astronaut, and when we find her, she is, the deputy director of the NASA. You don't find a woman in that position who isn't extremely intelligent, strong, has a real sense of self about her. She's very willful. She's had to survive in this world and hold her own, and so that's how I describe her. She's strong. I love characters. I love women and characters like this. Yeah, I think we find them in the beginning, and they're the best of friends. Like, Brian was at her wedding. She clearly knew he knew her husband, and they were like workmates. Like, I was his, work wife, and he was my work husband, and very, very close. And then this event happens in the movie where we get estranged. There's sort of a misunderstanding, something very confusing and scientifically unexplainable happens, and my character doesn't exactly stand up for him the way she probably could have, and he sort of takes the fall, and sort of that starts the beginning of the unraveling of their relationship. And we get to visit them again in the movie, and they have a chance to sort of wrong that right, to come to terms with what happened and realize that neither one of them were right or wrong. It was just a very unfortunate situation that was hard to explain. And they sort of went their separate ways as a result of it. Well, what's happening is the moon is threatening to crash into Earth. And when it does that, before it gets there, it'll break into a billion, trillion little pieces that will all come crashing onto the Earth and will pretty much kill everyone. So, they've got a big problem that they're trying to figure out a way to solve. And what we come to find out is that there's some sort of alien force at work, and it goes against everything that science believes. So you have the battle of science and metaphysics and what is possible in both of those realms. But it's clear that something is happening that has caused the moon to move out of its orbit and start descending onto Earth, and there's a ticking clock on it. So if they don't get up to the moon and figure out what this thing is and sort of destroy it, then little by little, the moon is moving closer and closer to the Earth and potentially causing destruction. That opening attack, first of all, we're looking at nothing. There's nothing. It's all imagination, and I think these are movies that, are very different from other movies. We really have to be able to commit to our imagination, and Roland can share with us the previs and give us a basic idea of what will be happening, but we know all too well that it's going to be more vivid, more alive, more real than we can even imagine. But we're forced to use our imagination and work to Roland or someone else reading out things to us that are actually happening that we have to react to. And it's a really different way of working. It sometimes can feel very disconnected, very, disjointed. We have to trust in what's going to happen on the other side, because we really, literally, for the most part, are really looking at nothing much but some visuals on a screen that are kind of assimilating what we might see with color tone and light flashes, things like that. But we're really not seeing anything of what we're really going to see. We were out on the street. It's supposed to be an LA street, and we're in Montreal, Canada. So we were racing the snowfall and the winter coming, because we were shooting in the fall. But yeah, we were out on a big street, and we're retrieving our endeavor. And of course, there's nothing. So we have to just imagine that this big spaceship is being rolled down the street and rolling through a neighborhood that's crashing all the, structures down around it. And again, it's just, back to acting basics 101, using our imagination and creating for ourselves what that would look like, feel like, how we would, feel in the situation. That's the job on movies like this. It's a lot of really make-believe. Recreating the gravity was pretty easy for me. I played an astronaut on a television show once for 2 years, so I actually did a zero-G flight, which was amazing to get to do that. So I have in my body what it feels like to float and what weightlessness is and how the body moves. And, I really understood fundamentally what that was. So those were just fun things for me to revisit. The stunts weren't, based on what I've done in the stunt world, the stunts were pretty mild on this for me. Roland does like to build, and luckily he's got the money to build. Not everybody does these days, so he has been building up a storm. That's true, and the sets are, just walking into the NASA set was pretty impressive. I think many people have a secret fantasy about walking into one of the most important rooms in the world and actually standing in there and feeling what that would feel like. So that was, I think, pretty impressive. And then also sitting inside the shuttle. While it was in pieces, and we used different parts of it at different times, it was also still pretty impressive to realize, just how small the space is and how these astronauts have to sort of maneuver in this capsule, this very small world, and how actually claustrophobic that actually is. We know that we're touching buttons that real astronauts have touched and real equipment that they actually use to fly, and we also had an astronaut here with us to also give us, all the rundown about the buttons, what we should push, not push, so that we tried to bring as much authenticity to all of those scenes as we possibly could. So we weren't just, if we were pushing buttons or clicking things, we weren't just randomly choosing, oh, this looks good, I'm gonna do that. We had a lot of, advice and sort of tutelage on what were the right buttons and when you push what for what and why you do what you do. So we tried to keep it as authentic as we could. Our movie, you know, there's a very interesting school of thought that maybe the moon is a megastructure. Maybe the moon is been built by a alien life form, and that the inside of the moon is actually hollow, and there's this life living inside of the moon. So we sort of explore that thought in this movie, and what if that were true? And that's sort of the metaphysics, you know, element to this movie that sort of is juxtaposed to the science that we think we know and that we believe in. So that's what makes it a little different. But I think the moon is really, really powerful. Whatever it is, or anyone thinks it is, it's true that the moon has such a gravitational pull on the tides. It has so much pull on us as humans because we're mostly water. So if it can change, you know, the tide, the biggest body of water on the earth, I think we have to believe that it can also affect us as humans because we are largely water. So I think the moon is very, very powerful, and I'm always in tune with when there's a full moon, when there's a blood moon, when all the moons become really important in my life. And I meditate a lot, and the moon is really, really important. I think we do make a ragtag group. That's a really good way to put it. We are all kind of anti-heroes. I don't think any one of us want to be there, but yet we have to be there, you know. And I think it's great that Brian is sort of this disgruntled, doesn't want to be there, but knows he has to be there. He's struggling to get his life together. He was, you know, he dipped off and became a person who struggled with alcohol and sort of keeping his life together. My character is there because she's an expert navigationist, so she has to be the one to guide the mission and make sure we get where we're going. Brian gets to fly the shuttle, and Casey represents, I think, the everyday average guy on the flight of his life. You know, he's not an astronaut, has nothing to do with NASA, but yet he's this brilliantly, he has this brilliant mind that has come up with the idea that the moon is a megastructure. So we realize we need him because if in fact it is a megastructure, then we're going to want a megastructure up there when we get there. So we take him along, but he represents an everyday guy. If you got to go on a space shuttle, you'd be seeing it through the eyes of that guy. So it's a fun group. Casey, John brings the levity. He brings a lot of humor, you know, to the movie, and I think movies like this need that. I hope my character brings some heart to it. I think being the woman up there while she has to survive in a man's world, I think a woman's sensibility is often very different than a man's, and I hope my character brings a little bit of that. And, you know, Brian... Patrick just brings, you know, the brawn of a man. He's there to try to save this day any way he can, and so I think it makes us like a good trio. We all bring something a little different.
I started reading Casey, and I was already interested because I initially liked his tenacity, his energy, his commitment to his intellectual pursuit. But then the more I read it, the answer became very clear that I can do everything with this. There are moments in this story where, as Casey, I can play absolutely everything. There are moments of sadness. There are moments of humor. There are moments of pure joy and elation. There's a real anger and a fury to him sometimes, and there's a tenderness to him too in the friendship story between him and Brian and Fowler, and I just thought there was a moment in this story where all of those things and so many more things are going to get touched upon, and it just felt like a great showcase for any actor, and also to play such an important role in a story that had so much scope to it and so much ambition to it, to play a pivotal role in the telling of that story, and get to do everything I did whilst acting that part. It was just irresistible from the minute I started reading it. When we first meet Casey, he's a man who in so many ways is completely isolated. He feels like he feels like an island. He feels like a person who's completely alone in the world. And in so many different ways. For a start, he's he's physically isolated from his childhood because he grew up in England, and now he's moved back with his mother to America after the death of his father. So he's transplanted in one way. He's also feels a disconnect from his family because his father has died. He's got no brothers and sisters, and his mum has dementia, so she doesn't recognize him anymore. So there's no point of contact there. He doesn't have any friends in particular. He doesn't have a relationship. So he's emotionally isolated. He's also intellectually isolated because he works with people who don't have any time for the things that he believes in. He's always trying to communicate the things that he believes and his passions and his interests and his theories to people, and none of them are interested. So yeah, at the start we find him completely alone in the world and searching for a point of contact, searching for a kindred spirit, and searching for an ear that wants to listen to what he has to say. The great thing about working with Roland is that it's always inspiring to work with somebody who's an absolute master of what they do. In terms of the disaster movie, he's done other movies. He shouldn't just be defined by his work on disaster movies. But in terms of the disaster movie genre, he's not only perfected a lot of those motifs, he created a lot of those motifs, and it's such a game raiser to work with somebody whose instincts for these things are so exactly on point. And you know, if you can't get Roland Emmerich to direct your disaster movie, get someone who can copy Roland Emmerich to direct your disaster movie. And so we know that in terms of the visuals, in terms of the suspense, all of the devices that he uses to create this disaster movie narrative, we know that any input that we have on that is redundant, really. But what he does do, he creates a very collaborative atmosphere when it comes to actors and their characters, because he wants to make sure that all of these characters are as rich as possible. Brian and Fowler, they have a history, and they've been on missions together before, and they share this past, and certain catastrophic events have happened to them in the past that they've both shared and they've both processed in different ways. And it's interesting then for Casey to join that energy, because you get these two characters who have this shared backstory, and there's a lot of context between them, and Brian is a character that carries an awful lot of regret around with him. He carries a lot of pain around with him, and Fowler knows all about that, and there's been conflict between them, and there still is conflict between them now. And for Casey, he's an observer to that a lot of the time. He's slightly outside of that, and it's almost like, you almost get the impression sometimes that it's like the child observing two arguing parents, that sometimes you feel that he just wants them to get along. And that's down to the script, of course, but that's a huge testament to Patrick and Halle's performances as well, that this connection between them is absolutely manifest. It's been amazing to work with Patrick and Halle. They're two actors who have really elevated what was already two very, very interesting characters on the page, and they've made them so much more. I think what Patrick brings to Brian is this feeling, especially early on in the film, although he does have a redemptive arc as well, you get a sense of the pain that he's carrying around. You get a sense that his demons are banging at the door 24/7. And although he turns into a hero, he's always a reluctant hero. And I think that that's something that is a very fine balance to play. Somebody that he's kind of forced to adopt the role of the hero when he doesn't feel qualified and he doesn't feel really capable of doing it. And I think that Patrick is an actor that's so committed to making every single second credible and believable and psychologically valid. Halle as Fowler, she manages to do something that's also very tricky, and it takes a very unique screen presence to do it, where she marries two sides of this character that feel almost completely contradictory. Like these two sides of a character shouldn't exist as successfully together, because on one hand she's very commanding, she takes no bullshit, she's a badass, and she's a commander, and she's in charge, and she's very powerful. And on the other hand, she has this softness and this kindness and a gentleness to her when you see her with a family, where you see her sharing these tender moments with Brian. And sometimes Halle is able to play those two sides of this character simultaneously, not go backwards and forwards between the two. You always believe that she's commanding, and you always believe that she's tender. And it takes somebody with an incredible aptitude for the craft to be able to pull that off, I think. The scenes in the shuttle, they've been a challenge to film, really, because you have to rely so heavily on your own imagination to pull those kind of scenes off. You're being guided through the scene by an off-camera voice that tells you what you have to be reacting to on a kind of second-by-second basis. But because we haven't seen the visuals, really, we've seen a very loose previs, so we sort of know the shape of it, but we don't really know what we're reacting to visually. It can be sometimes quite difficult to engage with. And also, because we're in this shuttle and we're all strapped into our seats, and usually there's two and one. So in the Endeavour, it was me behind, and then Halle and Patrick in front of me, and then in the Lander, it's me and Halle here and Patrick in front. You don't really feel that you're acting with people, because you feel that I can't see Patrick's face, I can't really see Halle either. You feel like you're acting in a bubble, and it's just all about the images that your imagination can conjure up and how you can find a way of reacting to something that isn't there. One of the things that's impressed me about the design elements and the sets in particular are the way that through the narrative journey of the story, the landscape completely changes. And I think that what's great about Roland's movies in general is that when it's early on in the movie and it's set in the real world, it really feels like the real world. It doesn't feel like a glamorous sci-fi disaster movie with a lot of very, very stylized sets and a lot of spectacular design elements. Early on, it feels grounded in a real, unglamorous, mundane reality that you can feel completely immersed in. And it's important that you do feel completely immersed in that, because the elements of the movie early on that are set in, on planet Earth 2020, they have to be real, because you have to create a real world which is in jeopardy and which is in danger of being destroyed later on in the film. So all of those early sets, Casey's apartment, the retirement home, the burger place that he works in, they felt so real and so immersive that you're instantly transported into that world, and you start to care about that world. It feels like a world that deserves to be defended. Then as you go through the film, the sets and the design becomes more and more stylized, and then you end up in the interior of the moon. You know what I mean? But somehow that feels like one whole journey. So I think the thing that's impressed me most is it feels authentic at every single moment.
I love history, and especially with all the stuff that's going on with the possibilities, like when you're reading it as a kid, like who built these things? Like who's responsible for building these pyramids, which is still kind of unanswered till this date. And I think Roland and his team have an appetite for filling in the blanks, and especially about the unknown and about possible answers. And so I remember I saw it with my brother, and we were just movie freaks growing up, Joel, and we saw that movie, one of our favorite movies. And so I've always had it on my bucket list to potentially work with Roland in some capacity. And so when my manager called me up and he's like, Roland Emmerich, and I was like, yes, I'm listening. Is called you and says that, there might be a part opening up. What's great is that you have a two-man team with Harald, Kloser, and Roland Emmerich, right? And if there's anything that I have character-wise, because I think, I always ask Harald, because I think Roland has so much to worry about technically and how to make it right. He knows when something's wrong, and he's like, nah, it's not right for the shot, not right for the shot. And so, sometimes we work with Harald for the dialogue is like, and what makes it, a lot of times, what feeds the urgency more, what feeds the character's objective more so that you can just streamline it and it ultimately helps the shot. And so it's a two-man team, and they both work beautifully together. And one feeds a lot of the character stuff, and then Roland, even when he's like kind of frustrated and wants things a little faster, it never comes out of like him being mean. He's never mean. He just like, we got to do it. We got blah, blah, blah. And he's such an animated guy. I love working with the guy, and he does make me laugh. I'm working with Charlie Plummer. It's amazing working with these actors who've been working for a while. I mean, I think he's 21 years old, and he's got a big body of work. He does a lot of independent film, and I came up from independent film, and I still love it because it's a different animal altogether. Like that, when you rehearse, you normally don't change a lot of lines in my experience, because you don't have a lot of time to film something. So a lot of times you rehearse it almost like a play, and then put it on camera, because a lot of times you have 3 to 6 weeks to shoot an entire film. And he's been doing a lot of it, and it's funny because some of my friends that I grew up with, acting-wise, that are actors, have played his dad. And I was like, wow, now I'm playing his dad. I never even realized until right now. I'm like, wow, I'm playing that kid's dad? That's amazing. Who else played your dad? He's like, Walton Goggins. I was like, dude, I did him. That's crazy. I've worked with Goggins like 3 times. And then this guy. And I was like, dude, I worked with that guy. Holy crap. And so it's amazing. And then you have to kind of embrace that role in a way. But he's a really good actor. When I looked at the arc, and I was studying what this man's journey and where he begins, and I thought, wow, I think in order for this to pay off at the end, it really has to be kind of a more passionate person. And plus, I golf with people that actually have a bunch of dealerships. It just so happens that I'm friends with a couple guys that's what they do. They sell cars. And not just salesmen, but owners of a bunch of dealerships. And they, in my mind, when I say, it's like, hey, Mike, what's going on? And they're on the sell. You know what I mean? In order for you to be successful in that, in like as a car dealer, all they think about is cars and selling, and they have an appreciation for that kind of thing. And I thought, well, I mean, I always love imitating or at least embodying somebody's spirit and soul. And it also scares the crap out of me when I have to do somebody that's more impassioned than I am. It really is, because it lends itself to a different kind of energy than I'd have at home. Like, I'm a boring guy. Like, I play chess, I watch movies, I read books, and I golf. It's not, it's not your typical, like, I don't know. To me, it's like other people consider it boring. I watch chess videos for fun, and I'm really into it. Tom is not that guy. I always loved doing my own stunts. I recently just started working out a bunch because I was, like during COVID, I was just golfing and stuff and sitting on my butt. And then when I would go golfing, I was like, wow, my legs are too sore. And I love that stuff. I don't know why. I'm like, it really puts you in the moment. There's nothing like a certain behavior and running over stuff, and it takes more of the pretend out of it when you're actually trying to go for something, and it's just a lot of fun. Like in drama, it's riddled with a bunch of behaviors and idiosyncrasies that you gather and try to absorb and then demonstrate, and so I'm all for it. There's some things that I can't do anymore. Like I can't really jump off a 10-foot something and rely and know that my knees are going to be okay, but I still enjoy doing it. The CGI, and because now I have I mean, I just admire it more. I mean, my admiration has gone way, way up. And so you see a lot of the green screen and blue screen, and with the practical stunts that go on, and you kind of don't know what to expect. And you know, just like Midway, for instance, like it looks amazing. I wonder what was green screen in that. You know, because there was people moving or whatnot. I wonder if that's how they shot it. So that's what's kind of cool. You get surprised, and I'm sure it's going to look great. You know, I'm sure he's going to. And you study, you know, as an actor, you like I said before, you want to dance with the camera. You want to make it a movement, and you want to be. This is one of the only times where you can actually be conscious of what you know, some of the camera moves. And I'm just very curious to see what the end result is going to be, and I'm sure that people that know his movies will be as well.
My initial impressions when I first read the script for Moonfall was that, oh my gosh, this is going to be a huge endeavor. And I loved the script because not only did it have all the action and all the excitement of, you know, an alien movie, but it also had the heart of, you know, families trying to work out their problems and real problems of divorce and separation and alcoholism and all of these problems that was going to get in their way of figuring out who they really were and how they can save the world. But at the end, you know, they figure out how to work out their problems while saving the world. When I first realized that this was a Roland Emmerich film, I freaked out because Independence Day is one of my favorite movies. It's one of those movies that I watch at least once a year. So when I found out it was a Roland Emmerich movie, I was super excited, but then really scared because I was really nervous. But then when I met him, he's just so friendly, and he's a man that just thinks, he's always thinking about something, and he's always, you can kind of see he's going like, well, if I'm doing this and I'm doing this and I'm doing this, like his mind always is going and is never stopping. But he's been so generous with us, really making strong decisions about our characters. So that was a really fun aspect. I could really work with Michael Peña about what our relationship looked like, what our history looked like, and you know, what kind of dynamic is in the household and stuff. And Roland was always really game about indulging us actors about creating our story and being able to make these like strong choices for ourselves. He gave us the meat and potatoes, and then we just piled on top of it. I play the character Brenda Lopez, who is married to Tom Lopez, played by Michael Peña, and the ex-wife of Patrick Wilson's character, Brian Harper. So originally she was married to Brian and had Sonny as their child. The relationship didn't work out because Brian Harper was completely overcome by his failures at NASA, and she left and married Tom. She really struggles to maintain a balance between the two families. Brian really pulls her in another direction with Sonny, and Sonny, I don't think ever really forgave her for maybe leaving Brian. So she's got this son who's in anguish and these two really beautiful daughters from this new family, and she's trying to balance the two families, and her whole journey is to try and find harmony between the two families, and which I think that she does towards the end. When the first devastation happens in LA, when the big tidal wave comes in, Brenda knows that Sonny is stuck in LA. And that has happened so many times on our planet where there's been a natural disaster and families have been separated. And for me, that's what really drove the first part of the film for her, was her absolute not knowing what the right decision is. Do I go and do I try to get to LA and you know, in any way possible, because flights are canceled, roads are blocked, or do I try and get my daughter safe so then I can go and rescue Sonny? And that's the whole thing that's tearing her apart, and also creates a lot of friction between her and Tom, because his plan is to get the girls really, to get them safe, but all she can think about is my son underwater? Is he alive? Is he dead? What's going on? So that whole first trajectory is, you know, the anguish of a family that's been separated and doesn't know if they're ever going to see each other again. I loved the casting of the character of Brian because on paper he's such an unlikable person. he drinks too much, can't hold down a job, doesn't pay his rent. And then you cast Patrick Wilson in it and you're like, oh, damn it, but I like him. And then on paper you see Tom, who's this really straight edge type A character, but then you cast Michael Peña in it and you're like, oh my God, but he's like so sweet. And what really unites the two characters is they're both hot-headed, is they both just fly off the handle. And Brenda's always kind of there just to bring them back to earth and be like, guys, come on, let's focus on what really needs to get done. And I loved that they both pulled me in that direction. You can kind of see that she has spent her life just like dealing with Brian. Now she's dealing with Tom, but at least he makes it easier for her. Sonny is a great character. I mean, he plays a young man who is quite frustrated in his life, and frustrated with his mom, frustrated with his dad, doesn't really know what to cling to. And you see him grow into a man by the end of the film. He takes responsibility for his life, for the life of his family, and realizes how important all of that is. So he sheds that adolescent feeling about him, and by the end of the film, he becomes a man. I know that's a cheesy thing to say, but it's true. Charlie has been absolutely so much fun to work with. He was already maybe like a month and a half in when I arrived to shoot the film. So he really showed me the ropes and kind of let me in on all the set dynamics and all the goss. So it was just such a blast to work with him. And I keep looking at him and being like, you're so smart. You're so mature. You're 20. I'm like, wow, what a wonderful man that I get to work with and bounce ideas off of, and always so helpful on set and offering to be the eye line or throw you lines or give you ideas. He's just such a gem to work with. Roland is absolutely a technical genius, and the strange thing about this film is that we've almost shot everything in a room. Like, we're in one room where we've shot car chase scenes, homes, workplaces. These incredibly intricate sets get built, and then it's so easy to actually just feel at home. For example, our Colorado house, I walked in there and I was like, can I just nap here? Because there's like a fire going, there's some leather couches. It was just so cozy. And I was also like, is that for sale? Because I will take it all. It was just so well done. And shooting, you mentioned shooting in blue screen. I mean, he showed us his vision of what the car chase was going to look like. And I just thought, how is this going to happen? We're in a room and there's 3 cars chasing each other. And then once we got into it, it actually felt like we were on this roller coaster ride, like a bumper car. Like there's cars bumping into us. There's 18-wheelers flying above us. It was such a surreal experience. And I had to keep saying to myself, I'm getting paid for this. This is my job. This is so fun. Kelly's been so fantastic to work with. We hadn't met before. She flew in from China. She's also been working on the film way before I have. So she also was so welcoming and just kind of showing us the ropes on set. She's just this really hyper talented human being. She showed us some of her work from China, and I was just so happy that we got to have her for this movie. Like, we just got so lucky that she's Canadian and also got to work, was eligible to work on the film as well.
Well, I first heard about it with Roland's name attached, and I think that was the thing before I even read the script that got me initially really excited about it. And I had just, I'd grown up on his movies and had always wanted to work with somebody like him who has, in my opinion, really been a part of filmmaking history. And then when I got to read the script and see what my character was like, and then find out, the rest of the cast and all the pieces started to come together, I just got so excited about it. And it was great. I was able to have a conversation with Roland pretty soon after I read the script and hear from him, what he was looking at when it came to the character and what he was wanting to focus on. And then pretty quickly after that, he was able to put Patrick and myself in touch. And yeah, we, you know, and then of course the global pandemic happened, so we had to sit around and wait a little while, but now we're here and we're getting to do it after all that. With a guy like Roland, I think he's always kind of looking to take it to the next level. Even before starting filming, I had watched White House Down, and there's that scene where the limousine is driving on the White House lawn and there's a whole car chase and there's a Gatling gun, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this guy's just been, he's just always trying to top it. And then hearing about, you know, just how his brain works and how he's able to conceive of all this stuff. But then for me to get to see it on the page, I mean, I'd never read a script like this, and just how extensive it is and detailed. And I mean, for me then also selfishly getting to see that I get to be in some car chases and, you know, in zero gravity, like jumping off cliffs and doing all this crazy stuff like that. I was very, very excited for that. That was when I was like, oh wow, you know, I hope this really does get to work out and I get to be having all that fun with him doing that. Sonny is the son of Patrick Wilson's character, Brian Harper, and when we first see Sonny, he is getting pulled over by a bunch of cops and arrested for a reason that we're not really clear on, but you know, originally it was kind of said that he and his friend got in kind of a mix-up and his friend had some, you know, magic mushrooms and drugs like that in the car, and then all of a sudden he was speeding and it turned into a hectic car chase, and my guy Sonny was just kind of a deer in the headlights a little bit. And then we're introduced to him and his relationship with his father, which is pretty toxic to say the least, and is one where there hasn't been really any communication for quite some time. And I feel as though my dad has really let me down in an extremely significant way and has not been there for me repeatedly. And finally, you know, he's making this ploy of I am going to be there and I am going to be, you know, a good dad, and I just don't buy it because, you know, for my whole life that's not been the case, and he's continually disappointed me. I had my own kind of understanding of, you know, Sonny's view of what his childhood looked like and, you know, the past 10 years with his dad on and off, but we more so had conversations, I think, of really trying, you know, in the moments we had on screen together, really trying to make the most of those and how we could do that. And I mean, this was really, I mean, this has been my first experience on a project like this, you know, the size of it and the tone of the film and the pace of it and everything. So that was, I was asking him a lot about that at the beginning because he had just worked with Roland on Midway, and obviously he does movies like Aquaman and, you know, The Conjuring and things like that, and it was really helpful to get to hear from him because obviously he has such a wealth of experience, you know, how he really operates and how, you know, what he's thinking of and when, and then, you know, we kind of used that as a jumping off point and then got into character somewhat, and yeah, I mean, it's just been really fun to get to do those scenes with him and you know, try things out, and he is such a phenomenal actor, and I've been such a fan of his for such a long time, so yeah, so that's been really cool. I'm gonna miss him once he heads back home for Christmas, but it's been really good thus far. Going from having such a deep resentment towards his dad, maybe even you would say kind of a hatred towards his dad, to then seeing his dad be a hero and really taking responsibility, and then potentially having to say goodbye to his dad forever. And so I think, you know, Sonny's really caught up in the emotions of what that is and the complexity of that, and surprised by the fact that, of course, he loves his dad. And I think in that moment, you know, any resentment, any kind of hate, anything that really existed in the past between them, I think really, you know, fades away, and all that really exists is I might never get to see you again, and understanding the severity of that. And we had talked about, Patrick and I talked a little bit about, like, that those were conversations that probably happened quite often when I was younger, in terms of, you know, when he would go on a mission, you know, he would always have to say to me and my mom, like, there's a chance that I might not come back. But I think obviously, you know, I was younger then, and my relationship with him has changed so much since then, that now seeing myself in that same situation, but with a basically like a different set of eyes and a completely different life experience, I think that definitely changes things. But I definitely think I am, you know, proud of him. And I mean, I think it's like anybody and their dad, you know, no matter what has happened and what you could, they're still your dad, and you still love them, and you still want to be them in some way and look up to them so much. And so I think that definitely is there too. The mission itself is to get Jimmy, Fowler's son, and Michelle, his guardian basically, to Aspen, or no, sorry, not to Aspen, to this base where Jimmy's dad is. And that's to get to safety, number one, but also in order to help them out up in space. And I think, I mean, Sonny takes that incredibly seriously. I think especially because pretty quickly, you know, him and his dad have this reunion of sorts. He's still pretty upset with his dad because, again, this is really the first time they're really getting to have a conversation outside of prison glass in quite some time. But I think it's also clear that, you know, Sonny's really scared more than anything, I think. And really quickly, I think his dad is able to make it clear to him that, you know, if he has any strength, if there is anything he can lean on right now, that's what he needs to do. And ultimately, you know, this is just life or death. When Sonny first sees Michelle, it's in this kind of, you know, just wave of chaos of, you know, everyone's leaving, shipping off, here's a gun, you gotta get in the car, you gotta drive here, you know, don't turn back, et cetera, et cetera. And so when he sees Michelle, I think obviously she's, you know, a ray of light. And then as their relationship starts to develop over that second and third act, I think, you know, Sonny obviously respects her, and I think they're able to start to kind of have little moments that they share together and little bridges of connection, and then that just kind of develops more and more and more. But yeah, but we really haven't, we've done the scene where we first meet, and then we've done the scene at the very end. So everything in between, we're gonna get to play with and have fun with. But I hope we do get to have fun with it, and I hope there is a sense of, like, you know, getting to try things out. Like, she makes fun of my tattoo and stuff like that we'll get to kind of play around about.
I mean, certainly harrowing stuff. I think that, you know, we definitely save that for when we're rolling, and then fortunately when we're not, we get to kind of laugh a little bit. And we had this Zane, you know, who's playing Jimmy. He's got this like full dummy version of himself that they use sometimes, like when he's in the back seat of the car and they're not really seeing him. So we have a whole bit about that's kind of going on, and Zane has created this amazing world about this character that's the dummy, and he's evil, of course, and everything. So we get to just do stuff like that, and then obviously then when we're going, we try to bring the intensity and bring the urgency and all that good stuff. But yeah, but it's a lot of fun. I think, like, you know, the stuff that we're getting to do is just so extraordinary and just kind of ridiculous in of itself, and getting to kind of put yourself in the middle of that, and you know, when you're working with such great people at the same time, it just makes it so much fun. That was amazing. I've never experienced anything like that, so I was like really, you know, going in kind of just hoping for the best, and it turned out to just be a lot of fun, honestly. I mean, it's very specific in how it operates, but once we had it down, it was kind of like a dance almost. You know, we were on this rig in the car, and we've got this great guy, Frank, who's reading out all the action cues and kind of allowing us to like move through the entire chase scene. And I just had never experienced anything like that, so that was a ton of fun. And then, you know, like when poor Zane is getting sucked up into the air and we're having to pull him in and stuff like that, where you know, and then when you get to kind of take a step back and watch playback or whatever it is, and get to actually see how it looks. So it's one thing when there's a big wind machine and fake snow and all that, you know, going, but then when you actually get to see how it's all coming together and the way the camera moves and everything, it really is something. It's just so detailed. I mean, down to like a calendar that's a 2022 calendar with like, you know, oh, this is Valentine's Day and stuff like that. I mean, he is just so detailed when it comes to all that stuff. And I genuinely feel like a little kid. Like, I really feel like this is what I am at, you know, when I was like 6 or 7 years old. And that's what's really cool, getting to work with someone like Zane, who's playing Jimmy, because obviously he is 8. And so he is like getting to actually really do all this stuff at the age that I think you're probably having the most fun, getting to really feel like, you know, you're in like your imagination, you know, and very rarely I think do people get to feel like that ever. So I think the fact that he makes that feel more tangible and really just even more as detailed as possible, I think that just, you know, adds so much fun to it, and it's just so impressive. I think somebody told me something like 130 sets were built, you know, for the entire film, which is just absurd. I mean, that's like that's like almost a set, a scene. But yeah, I mean, it's such a testament to him, but also all the people he chooses to work with. I think they're all such professionals and so good at what they do, and they make it look easy. It's definitely a little different, you know. We got our little cubicles that we go to in between takes and stuff like that. But no, I mean, we definitely have. Like, she's been introducing me to WeChat. I didn't know about that. I got her hooked on Plants vs. Zombies again because she apparently was a recovering addict of Plants vs. Zombies, and I, you know, I got her back on the good stuff. But but yeah, so we kind of, you know, we'll chat about that. And if I ever see her, like, we got 5 minutes, she's right back on there, you know, destroying all the zombies that she can. But yeah, I mean, you know, I think, like, in the spirit of the characters, you know, like you were saying, Jimmy and Michelle and Sonny all do spend this, you know, basically the entire second half of the movie together. And so I felt like, okay, even though, you know, these crazy, disastrous circumstances are in front of them, at the same time, you know, they have to kind of establish a rapport. And that's why I think it has been fun that naturally, like, we've been able to do that and kind of develop these jokes and storylines and stuff like that, and just kind of keeping ourselves busy, but also having fun. I'm so excited to see it. First and foremost, selfishly, I'm very excited to see it. but I mean, I'm so excited to see it because I think it is this larger than life film. I think it's extraordinary in what it's trying to do. I mean, there's a lot going on, and there's so much going on that it's really hard for me to even begin to explain to people what, I mean, you know, I can briefly kind of say, but then as soon as you get into one thing that connects to the next, and then it all kind of, you know, it just takes you down that rabbit hole. So I think I'm just really excited for people to hopefully jump into that rabbit hole and have a great time and you know, hopefully really enjoy and connect with these characters. But at the same time, I think just really enjoy what the experience of the movie is. And I'm definitely excited to experience that for myself. But yeah, and share that experience with their family and their loved ones. And I think especially, you know, coming off the year that we've had as a global community, like a movie like this, you know, in the past would have been such a, oh, this is just a ridiculous thing to happen. But now I think people have a different perspective about things like this. And so hopefully it can be a unifying thing more than anything.
When I first got the script, and it just shocked me that everything's going so wild and so crazy, and I have no idea how's everybody gonna do this. Are we seeing the actual things, or are we only gonna imagine everything in our head? And honestly, this is the first disaster movie for me, like, forever. So I would honestly have no idea how we're gonna do this. But once we're on set and Roland explains everything to us, it becomes really clear. I think it's really fun that we get to shoot this movie with our imaginations and everything. And you know, sometimes we have all the settings around us, the environment, everything looks so real, and we're like, all the snows and blizzard and everything surround us, and we just got to feel the presence of everything that's happening, and it's really cool. I play Michelle. She's the intern student who lives in Fowler's home and living with Fowler and his son Jimmy. And she has a pretty tough childhood because her parents got killed by a car accident, and Fowler's really good to take her and like took her as her own and raised her. Also, she's a very brave person because when Charlie got hit by the tree and she and she went back for him and to save his life. I think that's something brave to do in this kind of situation. We had this Zoom call like before he got me into the cast, because he didn't know me first of all, and we had to do this small interview online, and he just talked to me. He wanted to hear my English and my accent, because he wants me to do a slight Chinese accent on this role, and everything got so funny because he has his own accent too, right? So we got to communicate with our own accents, and it was really fun. And then he tells me about this whole story and how, like, what kind of person is Michelle and what she gets to do in this movie. And first of all, I thought she's only gonna be like a really small role in this movie, but then I found out that she actually stays until the very end. She didn't die, and I'm like, oh, that's a good thing, because nobody wants to die from a disaster movie. That means you're not that important. So yeah, I guess it's a good role. It's a good person, and it's a good role for me. And this is my first movie in North America. So I guess it's a good opportunity for me as well. Such an opportunity for me to be able to work with her, and she is so nice that I would never imagine a Oscar-winning actress will be that will be that nice. She's just so patient every time she does this. Usually, like, it takes 15 times or 20 times to do one shot, right? To do one scene, and she's just so patient with everything, and going through everything with me, and I just think she's a really nice person. It's like small roller coaster, but not that intense. But we did have this track underneath the car, so everybody was feeling this bumpness, this bumpy road, and everything was so bumpy, and we were just so cramping that small car because we had like 7 people, but we had to fit 5 people in the back. So everybody was so squished, and all of a sudden, there's no gravity, and we had to be lifted in the air, and we just had to pretend that happened to us, and all the up and downs, and all the hitting from the sides, and that's pretty fun. Whenever a disaster happens, it doesn't happen just to one country or one group of people. Like, we represent people from like all over the world. I probably represent like people from Asia. I don't know, because you always have people like me, like Zhang, like everybody else in this kind of disaster movie. So I guess important to let people know that we have to do something for our environment to prevent this kind of thing really happens, because it's really scary. I think it's the whole purpose for this kind of movie, to come out and to tell people that it's important for us to protect our planet, right? I think it starts with the moon is actually an alien base that's not a simple moon that we see every day. In the core of the moon is actually a higher technology, which we call an alien technology that we wouldn't understand at the beginning, but then the characters in the movie, like Michelle and Charlie, was probably still don't understand, because only Fowler and Brian knows what's going on, and they didn't have the time to explain everything to us, right? So we didn't know what's going on. We didn't know the moon is actually an alien base. So we just know that the moon's coming down, we're losing all the gravities, and the moon's pulling us from Earth. And if we don't hold on to something enough, in time, then we're gonna all be sucked in from the Earth to the moon, and we don't know what happened to those people then. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to survive. We don't actually see people sucked up. But we like for me personally, I get to, and for Zane too, we're probably gonna be wired and to be a little bit raised raised above from the Earth, and that's kind of fun to do. I used to do a lot of wirings before when I shoot movies seen in China, but never here. But I guess the technology is always the same, and they always use the same wires. So I guess everything else would be the same. But yeah, that's always fun to do. And Zhang is the first time for him to do this, so he was so excited that he could actually fly in the air, and he just didn't know what's going on, but he enjoys it. I have a personal connection to that role, Sonny, because me personally, like my parents got divorced when I was his age in this movie, when I was Sonny's age in this movie, right? So I knew that kind of feeling that he would have to go through at such a young age, that without a dad or mom being around, and being raised up with this kind of environment. So Sonny is, he is a cool person, first of all, but he just went through so much, and his dad is not around all the time, so he blames him for certain things. So I guess he has this personality that he doesn't want to share a lot to Michelle, so he doesn't really talk much around her, but Michelle is willing to share her story first to him, so that really opens him up. I think that's why it's helpful for him to get along later in this movie. I think it's just a new idea, like all from, the disaster movies before. You probably see like all the environmental things, like global warming and all the things that you've seen already. But with this, you don't usually get to see people being sucked up by the moon, right? So I guess this is a new thing, and that's exciting enough. And other than that, I think there's definitely more to that. He's just a master of disaster movies. He knows the people who's going through emotions like this, and he knows like what becomes the most important once you encounter things that like this. It's the family, right? You try to protect your family, and you're willing to do anything, to trade anything for your family to be safe. And he knows that, and he knows how to bring out that.
I was like triggered by a book I read. I read a book called Who Built the Moon? And I kind of was so fascinated by it. And it like kind of pretty much like kind of says, moon is not like a natural object. And I think that was a great idea for a movie. And then I kind of thought, well, what happens if this object would fall down to Earth and we have to deal with it? And that's how the movie, in a way, the first inkling of a movie idea always starts. You find a really fascinating idea which fascinates yourself. And then it took like pretty much 3-4 years or 5 years even, to get the right script. And it's a relatively simple idea. The moon's falling to Earth. We have to figure out what it is and how to stop it. And it's then, about the people who go up there and their families who stay behind and have to survive. The idea of this film is like naturally very, very fantastic. And because it's so fantastic, you want to kind of, give it, like a lot of believability. And the believability comes from science. And, the more like naturally you research, the more you can like kind of give the people some sort of like a basis, that people can believe in it. And we went to great lengths, to talk to a lot of people, but at the end, I'm always like saying, well, it has to work for the story. And so it's a mix between, like kind of fact and fiction. We had like our first Skype. He lived in New York, I was in LA. And I immediately kind of said, oh my God, the coolest kid ever. He is one of the best actors I've ever worked with, because it's effortless for him. There is you never have the feeling he's acting. That's like kind of a very, very amazing quality. I grew up in Germany. In Germany, we don't have like really superheroes. And I don't understand superhero films. I honestly admit it. And so I had to find, in a way, my own genre, you know. And I realized, you know, that, and that was like actually probably came through Independence Day. I like had a lot of disaster elements in the film. When you like study disaster movies, you realize normal people have to become superheroes. Because if they not become, develop some superpowers, they will not will survive the disaster. I always like kind of think a movie has to kind of tap into problems of our time. And I think this movie heeds a big warning against, we should be very careful with artificial intelligence. And we should, you know, keep our planet intact. But that's also like deeply rooted in all my films. I'm always, you know, try to put a message in that we should be careful that we don't pollute our planets too much because we have not yet the technology to leave it. I tend more and more to believe in CGI, but I also believe still in practical effects because they're like kind of the glue which holds it all together. And when you come very close to people and you have to feel this is a real piece of wood, you know, or a real car, or, you know, then it's like kind of makes the people more buy into that this is really happening. That was some of the hardest scenes I ever shot in my life because it was a real cockpit. We didn't build that cockpit, we got it. We found it in a museum in Florida. And the museum went into bankruptcy. And we said to them, can we get this thing? And they said, what? What do you want to do with it? And so we like convinced them to lend it to us. And we said, we will repair it all. And we realized from the very beginning it has two halves, which is great. But it's also in a movie you'd make everything take apart. But this had only two parts. Patrick and Halle had a very, very cool chemistry with each other. They're both excellent actors, you know. But it's always like you never know, will they have chemistry? And then John Bradley is this sweet guy. You know, I saw him in Game of Thrones and I fell in love with him. Because even in that like kind of brutal world, he was this like gentle soul. You know, who survives this whole ordeal. And that was for me the most important, that, you know, have somebody who's crazy, but also extremely lovable. And that's what he is. And so this was a really, really cool combination, you know, of these three actors. I was like a fan of Michael Peña, so we found like Michael Peña. And he is awesome in this film as the car salesman. He owns 10 dealerships all over America. Kelly was proposed by Huai brothers. They had made a movie with her, and they allowed me to see the unfinished film. And I also like immediately said, "Oh my God, she's like." You know, when you like kind of have work with actors of a different, you know. Language and nationality, it's quite difficult. I had this in my last movie where I worked with a lot of Japanese actors, and I needed all the support around me with translators and people to judge the performance and stuff like that. Kelly was Canadian. I could talk to her in perfect English. She is Canadian. But she's also an accomplished singer, musician. She is quite a good actress, and she has she's this multi-talent, and also far beyond her years as a person. I mean, she feels like a very, very old soul.
I think he wanted the stuff back on, you know, certainly stuff back on Earth to be rooted in reality, and him. Pete Travers, the visual effects supervisor, spent a lot of time on the logic of what was transpiring on the film. I mean, you know, there were a lot of physics involved, and they really, really did their homework, and it helped me a lot to guide the the lighting that was inspired by it, and some of the physicality of the gravity and storms and snow and meteors and stuff like that, which were all very much lighting elements and cinematic moments. Roland and Pete and the visual effects vendors is set up a very nice, pre-vised all of the larger scenes, so that we could capture as much in camera and match up to those. And I think it's very important for me personally, being the cinematographer. The more that we can capture in camera, the more believable and also keeps the audience rooted in the story. We shot everything on a 360 blue screen stage, and the special effects supervisor built some very, very nifty, almost like hovercraft platforms for the cars to go on, so they could slide, almost float, and they also articulated. In conjunction with that, we utilized 2 techno cranes or telescoping cranes with stabilized heads that had 3 axes. So we were able to tie in the movement that was happening in a wide shot. If the car lifted up off the ground, then we could, if it's going up, you tilt the camera in a side shot, you tilt the camera down, and whoop, the car's lifting off. As it's coming down, whoop, turn the camera this way, and the car lands back down. So we really encaptured all of the movement of the big action of the scene, and the cars were strictly flat on a stage floor, and it was quite effective. It was a simulated shuttle and not a set. It had its own unique challenges, but Kirk Petruccelli, the production designer, and his art direction team did an incredible job of modifying it enough that we could shoot. We also shot on some small, newer small remote heads, the Mini Libra, and it allowed us to get into positions and work in this space that wasn't completely able to be disassembled. The reason why he is a perfect director for a film like this is, one, he's done a number of them very successfully, and he has a very unique way of creating things on such a grand scale, and allowing them to be done within the means of the production. Which I find remarkable.
We start base level with us as people in our terrestrial kind of how we live and our kind of day-to-day kind of nuance of life. And we're all hit with this massive problem. And it's how we come together and how we do that is how we had to figure out how to tell the story. And Roland's concept on the whole thing was, let's keep it very, very real. Let's keep it really original and very heartfelt, because these characters, each and every one of them, have something inside and outside they need to share. Well, Roland's vision is all about scale and the human contact with that scale. He's got heartfelt characters that are thrown into impossible situations, and nothing is too big for him to approach and to tackle and to and really just maximize the scale of the event. And that's why I love it. It's a real challenge each and every time we work together, and it's an honor. The stage is a better format for Roland in which he can operate with freedom, with the viewpoint of what's to come. He's an effects genius. So in essence, if we go to location and really try to pull the specific things that really make a location effective for the storytelling, we'll do it. Bottom line, we had one massive exterior sequence that we had to do because it all happens in daylight and it happens at scale. There's not a stage big enough to do it. But past that, everything became something that we designed, created, and built on stage, and then we would really very quickly move it, change it, slide it away so the next piece of business can come in. So I think Roland's expertise is how do you tell a giant story
in a very efficient way. We've been really fortunate to have NASA as a partner in the storytelling and in the movie. And they've been nothing but gracious in telling us what the shuttle missions would have been. We actually acquired a space shuttle cockpit interior that is actually one of the training programs interiors that was set aside because it's an old technology, but it happened to be available, and with NASA's help and in Florida we contacted the people who own the piece itself and asked if we can make use of it and turn it all on and bring it to life. And what I'm very, very happy about is that we've created, I believe, the most accurate interior of the space shuttle that is in a movie today. There's nothing that, all the systems work, they're in the right orientation, the seats are accurate, are appropriate, the lighting is all there, the details to the handwritten, scribbled charts that we may need are in there. And we were able to get it here in Montreal, kind of break it apart a bit so we can kind of use different techniques in which to show weightlessness and how they would actually, the pilot, co-pilot, and people would operate the spacecraft on its way to the moon. I got to tell you, there's some great minds that, and Roland is the greatest of minds, that because he has the imagination, the insight, and the knowledge and the ability to let it happen and create it, make it happen. And we're all along for the ride. And it led to some really fantastic discussions, very incredible things of learning. I mean, my knowledge of physics has been, dramatically increased because of just conversations at 8 o'clock in the morning. So with that in mind, it's really, it lends itself to Roland's idea of telling a realistic story about a nightmarish possibility. During this chase sequence, the moon is on one of its very fast elliptical orbits very close to Colorado, which is ripping the Earth basically apart at the same time. So during this incredible car chase, there's mountains that are shifting, trees are flying, buildings are being shifted, the land mass is changing, and these guys are driving their Lexus through all this thing and making sure they survive. And not only are they battling the people chasing them, they're battling the environment that's happening around them. So what Roland did is he prevised the entire sequence, and it became this incredibly fun ride, and he knew what he needed to shoot and how he would shoot it and what we would not need. And through it, we figured that we can put them on a stage, blinding snowstorm at the same time, but only when there's impact, only when there's the car flies over a gorge with some gravitational help and crash lands into a forest, and when it stops is what we build when they get out of their car. So the entire sequence was created bigger than we could possibly build. The car is not even on the market yet, the one we've used. So it's very precious. It's the only one of its kind. So we had to be very delicate with the car. It's a very important car in this film. The family escapes all the natural and terrestrial problems going on around it, and yet the car survives and the car does its job, and it's epic. We had to do a car dealership, so we actually had a lot of help from Lexus corporate to help us get the logos ready or right. The interior design, we used their newest looks, that we worked with them to make sure that we were accurate in what we portrayed. They gave us 5 vehicles that we could showcase. They were, terrific and supportive in every aspect of their vehicles. And it works for the movie. NASA's Mission Control is an iconic place. It's really, once you've seen it in an image bank or visit it, you realize the power and the impression that it gives you. And the focus of the first impact of the moon coming out of orbit happens to be in the NASA Mission Control. The monitors, there's 80 some odd monitors within the set itself. Each had to be created, all the graphics had to be created, the giant screen wall had to be created. We had to set up the different departments on where certain specialists would sit and how that works within NASA itself. It had to connect to a bit of a command and control center in the backside of the set piece, and then a hallway that led us outside. I'm really excited about the humanity and the joy in these characters and the way they handle themselves in an incredibly scary situation. I think the scale of the event is going to be so large, it's almost impossible to imagine. But at its core, there's these great characters, and they really love one another, and there's laughter, there's pressure, there's love lost, there's tensions between them, yet at the same time, we're all human, and they work it out, and it gives me hope for the future. Well, I think every one of the sets in the movie are important. They're characters within themselves, and if I do my job right, no one will ever know we did a job. So I think for my gang, what's understated is the best, but really what happens is you use real things to make the impossible that much more accessible, and you can understand and really empathize with the characters within it. And we had so many different people, so many different incredible artists, technicians, you name it. We've all worked together during COVID. We're very safe, very specific about how fortunate we are to be working right now. Montreal was a godsend of being able to work here because of the humanity and the people. And we all respected the issues at hand. We all really wanted to stay safe. We want to do things and employ people and create something that makes people smile and forget about life for a moment.
This is obviously visual effects, and we're talking about the Colorado mountains and all these things, and some big waves coming through a lobby of a hotel, and same thing, coming. I never haven't worked with Roland. I was thinking that a lot of that was visual effects, and a lot of that became a lot of construction, which was surprising. But also during the process, a lot of the things that started off as a plan for visual effects became built sets for all the good reasons of having everything on camera, spending a little less on visual effects, but also, to fill the space with more reality and everything. So Roland, as we were going, decided that more of the sets like the moon core and all the induction chamber, was going to be a build and not just like a big set extension, just a big visual effects thing. We were put in contact with Dennis Jenkins, this engineer from NASA who would work at building Vandenberg launch site and worked several years at building Lariviére-Charron. He actually had written also like a 3-volume book of the whole construction of Lariviére with all his pictures in it and so much material and so much information in those books by himself. So through him, we also found a simulator that was used for practice, for astronaut practicing and everything, and this simulator was an exact replica of the interior of the shuttle. There were actually pieces that used to be interchanged between the real shuttle and this replica. So he knew that was sitting somewhere in Florida in some museum that was half abandoned, and he was actually working on really hard at retrieving it to sort of save it. We built physically what we call the white room, which is on the launch platform is the axis and where the astronaut gets changed and suited up, and then they board onto the shuttle. So we built that bridge and that room. We built the interior of the shuttle cockpit. We built the mid deck, which I learned what it was, is that room underneath the cockpit, and we built the whole cargo bay of the shuttle. We did the mission control, all based on these informations. And I have to think that they're, 99% exact. Again, to help the look of the movie and sort of anchor it in reality, we use a bit of a retro look. So, thinking retro, we went to those sort of 70s, designy hotel that were kind of typical then, and because they bring a level of great visual. Kirk especially liked that look, so we went for that. And the design of it, obviously, as you design it, you are not only recreating a beautiful lobby that works visually, but also had to work with the amount of water that was going to play in there. We, working with special effects, we built retaining walls right behind our real set walls, and all the materials, we printed wallpaper that was waterproof instead of real wallpaper. All the set was built in concrete panels instead of Luan, and so that it'd be water resistant. When I also read the script, you see Aspen, Colorado mountains, and you're gonna end up in some location, and or you think you're gonna end up in some location and extend some real mountains. And I know as they were looking for that, they realized how much visual effects was gonna be important, how much the moon is close to the earth then, so the gravity has changed, and everything that goes in there. And when you start thinking of having a whole team in sort of winter time going on the mountains and trying to recreate all this, so I think Kirk super cleverly came with a proposal of building a road, a mountain road with some beginning of mountains on a stage, and trying to make this and a portion of the bridge and the tunnel that we needed for the story on one of the biggest stages that we had here in Montreal. Well, there were 60 shoot days, which was very short. I don't have an exact count, but I had a breakdown of 130 sets. Started off construction, 2.5, 3 months before shoot. We loaded Grande, the stages here. There's the 2 long stages, plus all the little, what they call multi-purpose rooms that are just, service rooms and support rooms. We basically, for the first pass, built sets everywhere in every of those. We had 3 sets on every of the big stages, 2 to 3 sets and plus, apartments in the smallest, support room that is usually not a stage. We just filled all square footage. And so we worked those 3 months just, delivering those sets, the hotel, the burger joint, the Casey's apartment, Brian's apartment, the retirement home, and all these sets. And we struggled to get there and stuff, and then we put it there, have it all nice, beautiful for the first week of shoot, and then, we sort of lift our heads and we're like, oh, that bought us the 5 first shoot days. So there's 55 coming.
Roland and I always used to take a little time while we're making a movie to think about a possible next one. And so during the filming of the sequel of Independence Day, Roland at some point pulled me away with this idea. There is a theory out there that the moon might be a hollow, constructed object. And so I checked it out a little bit and found it very fascinating. And so with our fantastic co-writer, Spencer Cohen, we sat down and, started to develop characters, and that's how it usually goes, to find a story that's emotional with characters that people can relate to. There's something really strange going on with the moon. It's changing its orbit, and it looks like it's going to fall down on us, which is a completely overwhelming situation. But humans and the human spirit, don't give up so quickly. And as we see now with our society, there's always people who grow above their potential. It usually starts with a screenplay, with a script, and there you can write just little things like unimaginable imagery you've never seen before of devastation and gravity events and gravity waves, and everything is going crazy. As you can imagine, once the gravity of the moon, which is 1/6 of Earth's gravity, comes so close to Earth, the whole gravity situation in that field in between becomes very unpredictable, with the atmosphere, being pushed in or sucked into one direction, then coming back. Air supply is going to go away. Gravity is going to be unpredictable. Not just, things starting to float, but it's also, pulled from the sides, pulled through weather, wind, and, also tectonic problematic situations, to say the least. And so this was like an opportunity to actually come up with things we've never seen before. Humans have this amazing quality to cling on to hope and to cling on to leaving behind the place that we lived in for our kids and for the next generations to come. And in our movies, we usually try to tap into that feeling of our place here is worth saving. People are good at heart. I'm very proud, like usually we can get by without really bad people. Yeah, there might be people who, you know, make bad decisions in certain situations, but we usually don't need a bad guy who wants to destroy the earth, because it comes from within, the feeling of this is a good place. We're kind of chosen ones. Each and every one of us has a purpose and has some kind of duality with who we are and maybe what is out there. Patrick has, since Midway, been just one of our absolute favorites. You know, while shooting Midway, we were talking to each other behind the monitor saying, oh, we need to do another movie with this man. And it's just, you know, all in all, on the set, in front of the camera and behind the camera, it was just such a wonderful experience that we definitely wanted to revisit that. And Halle was more like a dream of, oh, you know, how could we possibly convince Halle to you know, to play this part, and it was a little bit of a long shot, and when we heard that Halle likes it, actually it was like, oh yeah, yes. I have to say, one of my absolute favorites in our cast is Donald Sutherland, and as I'm saying his name, I have goosebumps that he's in our movie. And it's just like every word that comes out of his mouth is like the gospel. You just believe it. At the very end, the last one to join our cast was Michael Peña. And same thing, the first Zoom meeting, I was like, oh, okay, this is the guy. We don't have to do anything here. It's just let him do his thing. He is the guy and then some. His timing and his little, you know, lighter bits that he can just throw in on the go, it's just genius. It's a joy. The folks at NASA have been just fantastic. Like when they read the script, they just understood what kind of movie this is, and I just feel they wanted to be part of the epicness and of the fun and of the, as I said, the spirit of the mission. Obviously, once they open their doors, it makes a huge difference for, you know, stock footage and logos and believability and just the whole scientific team they provided us with, and that was just a wonderful collaboration. Especially in times like ours, where our existence is actually a little bit challenged. People want to see the human spirit prevailing over an insurmountable challenge. People feel that, you know, there's this space in between. It is serious, and we're getting this story told, but we are in this space of fiction, and we are in this space of where we can allow ourselves to also have a little fun with it, and at the same time see the struggle and the suffering and the, you know, the emotion that is in these characters and that people have to come up with to even have a chance.
It's entirely packed with special effects, so it's very exciting. Lots of challenges. Every second page was another effect, another gag to be prepped and shot. So it was quite nice to read that kind of script. It was exactly what I was expecting from Roland. Large effects like huge tip tanks, zero-G rigs for space, riot scenes with burning semi-trucks. It was very challenging, and every time I would ask him, is this a live effect or are we going VFX? You know, every time he wanted some live action, and that gives him a very solid base for building the visual effects around, and it was well appreciated to have the opportunity to do all those live effects on set. That was basically a very large, a quite large steel tower with 2 dump tanks on it, hydraulically actuated, and we had 7,000 gallons of water coming down onto a ramp right into the lobby of the hotel. The big challenge was to manage the weight of all this water, get it in the right place, and make sure the set wouldn't leak. So we had to make the set basically a pool that would contain all this water over and over to build up a level of water within the set so we could shoot the escape from that tsunami wave. That started by building the shuttles. We were working with construction, art department, to fabricate these shuttles. They had to be modular to weld all the walls so we could shoot within the shuttle. They were not that big. And then we had to motivate these shuttles so that we could create vibration. We could tilt them up to a launch position. So hydraulics, pneumatics, we call them shaky decks and tilting decks, were built to position the shuttle and give it some action so that the actors could react to vibration and impact and different levels of inclination. Then within the shuttle, we had to fly these people as if they were in zero-G. So we put together a motion control robot fly rig so we could hook up our astronauts, our talent, to these flying rigs, and we could pre-program all the moves ahead of time and play them over and over again so that the actors could easily find their way within the same move. We were not guessing the move, so that the actors could really get into the motion and not have to do too many takes in flying suits. Well, the shuttle itself was on what we call a shaky deck. It's hydraulically actuated, and this is just vibrations and impacts, and we control it with motion controllers and hydraulic valves. This allows us to repeat the same action over and over again, and we can adjust that action to the liking of Roland, our director, so that he gets the right amount of shake at the right time during the scene. We had the replica shuttle that was used on the motion base as well. And that was great for getting to the moon. So we shook that, we tilted it up to 45 degrees, brought it back down. And then up in space, they went into the lander and rover part of the shuttle. And that's where we did the same thing with the shaky decks. And we had all sorts of different scenes to be shot in the mid deck between the shuttle and these landing modules, and that was quite a lot of fun to work on that, because we had all sorts of rigs to create airlocks opening up and wire works at the same time, and lighting effects that went round and round to simulate the shuttle being in a spin on itself. So that was very interesting. First of all, we had a huge military vehicle, had to push a boat. It was a 30-foot yacht out of the way. So there was a lot of rigging involved there. And then we had all the Humvees that were preceding the shuttle. The yacht was a lot bigger than we expected it to be. And we had to move it a lot farther than expected, because Roland saw a shot he could get with that, revealing the shuttle behind it. So we brought in a hydraulic winch to winch it in its last position. We had to solidify the whole thing because it was a fiberglass yacht that would have fell to pieces after 2 takes. So we had to put some roll cages within it. And the truck that was pushing it had to be in contact with it, so we tied the truck to the yacht, and we had cable cutters to release it when he pulled back and moved on further down the scene. Roland came up to me and asked me to create a car chase on stage. So I said, okay, that's interesting. So poor man process car chase on stage with 3 cars. So these cars are bumping each other, are shooting at each other out the window, and they're driving in rough terrain. And okay, I said, let me see, how can I do that? You can put these cars on casters, but they won't be shaking and they won't be able to move sideways. So we decided to put the cars on air skids. Basically, we had some hovercraft technology platforms with actuators that could shake the cars, and we could move all these cars around with hydraulic winches. And this allowed us to create a very realistic chase with all the motion of the vehicles going up and down and hitting each other and shaking. So we had 7 axes of control on our astronauts that were in flying harnesses. So we could have them travel, rotate, and tilt in every which way. And we could repeat that. And that was, to me, the only way to get these scenes shot in the amount of time we had. So we were not rehearsing any motion on set. We were just rehearsing the acting, basically. And when we had the acting down, the motion stayed the same, and it made it possible to get through these scenes in the amount of time we had to.
There was two worlds, I'd say. There was the first world at the beginning where we want to feel that we are in reality, and we want to reproduce what people know, what they've seen on TV about all those flights that's been in the sky and all this. But when we get to the fictional part, which is where we got in what never happened, which is the fool falling on Earth, and you have that many hours to get there and all this, then, and this was a big part of the fun of the movie, is to create a new suit, a new astronaut suit. I went and in the NASA museum, in a way, on the web, and tried to see everything that was done before, everything that all the prototype they created and never used, because it's a huge work at the NASA each time they create such a custom. So I went there and I got inspiration from the 60s and all this, and then had fun to play with that. Roland is a bit like a painter. He knows, he visualizes everything he wants to shoot, he will shoot. And he works also with post-production. He knows the effect he'll do, he knows all that. So working with him, it's always to find what's bright, what's dark, what's the challenge with the different colors and all this. So he works a lot that way. Roland works about what you see, the lines, the color and all this, even before talking about the character. That's the way he works. That's the way I feel I should work with him. For Fowler, there was many way probably to dress her. Again, since we were in real life and all this, I first looked at Halle, work with her, see what she wears normally. After the first third of the movie is when we leave the NASA and she's no more in her environment where she works and all this, and then try to find a way. Where is she from? She was a pilot 15 years ago. Okay, so she went to get back in the action. So which way would she get dressed? So okay, she was used to pilot jacket. She was used to that kind of pants, and then to bring that slowly. When you decide to make custom for such scene where there will be zero gravity or things like that, you just need to, you have to prepare yourself to have doubles, triples for the rigging and all this. I always try to do things that were fitting to the body and all this, so there wouldn't be a major problem for the team when they shoot that, to say, well, the scarf should go flying that way and this, because it's too volatile. So this is the only thing where you have to concentrate. And from there, also you have to work with the stunts. in prep to see what kind of rigging there will be, where there is going to be holes, what would be easier, should we fake it, should it be an opening with Velcro and just bring the rig out? Okay, do we need a bigger size because of the rigging under? These are all things you have to be careful with.
For the Endeavour spaceship, there are a lot of wonderful images that already exist, thank God, and we were fortunate enough to get a mock-up that had been done that was just sitting all by itself, lonely, waiting for somebody to take it to Montreal, and we altered it to make it camera-friendly and embellished it and wired it up, and that's what we based the Endeavour on the Endeavour. The other spaceships were set designs that took months and months of study and building components and then deciding which type of bells and whistles went into that to create a really fantastic looking ship. What we did first was discuss the characters and try to figure out who they are, and then we assigned a color palette to each of them. That would be a subtle introduction into their sets, which we did. Then we talked about different types of lighting for different types of set to give it a different look. Halle Berry, we were in the gold and earthy tones. And then we went to earth tones with green for Brian, and Casey was in blue. We assigned it blue because he was always wanting to go to space, and that was his world. And Brian was very grounded and stuck on Earth. We were fortunate enough to have somebody on board at NASA who was available to answer any questions that we had about any details. And we were also given permission to use their beautiful library of images, which was very helpful on this show. We wanted to know what each person, what their responsibility was in that room to make sure that it was as authentic as possible. When we first started this project, we had many chosen locations. And after we were shut down because of the pandemic, certain locations were no longer available to us. And so we quickly started designing and building sets in studio. Some that were very ambitious for the time frame that we had, but there is an excellent team here that just made it all happen. The majority of the movie was shot in studio. There was amazing designs, a brilliant team of art directors and set designers that created the spaces that did look authentic and real so that we could bring in our dressing and make it a whole world. The Griffith Observatory, which is the most spectacular Art Deco building, was a bit of a challenge, and we were slotted to do some of this on location, and it became obvious a little later than we hoped that we would not be going there, so away we built, and it was a bit of a challenge to find all of the necessary pieces for an exhibit. We did build some wonderful pieces, as you can see right behind me there, and it did look beautiful. It was a huge scale set that was on an empty lot. Everything was built, the runway, the streets, all of the buildings. What made it authentically Los Angeles were palm trees, which is key. Also the great detail to the street dressing and the graphics that we find on all of the buildings. And the destruction was quite something, because what we like to do is dress the set as it would be and then go in and destroy it ourselves so that things fall where they would naturally fall. So it's not about throwing a bunch of destruction all over the place. You start with the real thing and then you destroy it. Well, there were a couple of epic destruction scenes, what you just mentioned, the LA streets. There's also a hotel set that we started off in its pristine condition and with special effects destroyed it and then reset it and then destroyed it again and again. Well, there was a great special effects team, and we had doubles and triples and dried some stuff out when we had a few days to and reset it. It's a lot of coordination between us and special effects, and it worked out very well. It's a magical place. It's really beautiful, from the hand-painted backdrops in there, the set designers, the construction, all the sculpting that went on for months, the painters, the greens team, and finally the layer of snow that really gives it this beautiful magic. I did not have a great amount of decorating to do in that set, actually. We're just adding in some exterior pieces, and then there was the Aspen house. I have many favorite sets. The latest one, I think, would have been the Aspen fire station, just because the level of detail that went into that set was just spectacular. And then we destroyed it. Even though it's an empty, abandoned fire station, it had a life of its own before all of this catastrophe took place. It was really great that there were a lot of existing images for this set. Of course, we built the majority of the consoles in there, because that's not something that you can readily find. And there's a lot of great visuals in there, also from NASA images that we were provided with. I would say that it's been a really challenging experience to work on a Roland film. It's been epic. There was a lot of shared ideas between us. A little bit difficult during the pandemic, everybody in masks or on Zoom meetings, so you don't have the direct contact that you normally would. There was improvisations on every set. I would dub it the morning marathon, where I saw Roland walk in, and it was set, lighting, actors, and we made changes, and every time that we made changes or subtle adjustments, it was perfect, and you could see it. So he has a great eye, and it was a fun marathon.
Even though the moon in our movie is only 1/3 of the mass, the gravitational equation is a function of the distance to the center of the object. So there's a point in the movie, near the end of the movie, when the moon is so close, even though it only has 1/3 of the mass, it actually is exhibiting a stronger gravitational force to the people standing on Earth. And that's why all these anti-gravity effects. And so the math actually checks out. There's a certain point, in particular during the Aspen chase, you still have Earth gravity, because the Earth didn't go anywhere, right? So you still have this 9.8 meters per second squared acceleration downward. But then the moon was providing 4 to 5 times that gravity to the side. We've got some really strong vendors on this movie, and again, it's all going to add up to about 700 artists or so, and we just really have to kind of break it down. Okay, so you guys take care of the mountains getting destroyed, you guys take care of the flooding, you guys take care of the inside of the look of the moon. The shots up in space is a different group of people. So, and then really what we're doing is we're just kind of coordinating all that effort. We have kind of built up a curriculum of how to do zero-G over the years, and almost always it's a bag of tricks. Depending on the shot, depending on what we're trying to accomplish in the scene, then that kind of moves towards a certain technology. And with the zero-G, we had people on wires. We had what we kind of call it a seesaw platform, where that way we could have people lay on their bellies, and then it's like we have a kind of a counterweight, and then we're just kind of rocking the back and forth. So you get this nice kind of smooth kind of sinusoidal motion. And then sometimes it'll be CG. So there's really kind of like layers, just depending on the shot, but there is no one magic rule that works for everything. It starts with previs. Actually, it starts with Roland. What does he want? A number of these conversations early on, Roland was very good, and he's always very good about this, is kind of what's the purpose of each shot, what's the purpose of the scene. And one of the things with that opening scene is he wanted to make sure that it was very clear was that the anomaly was a mystery, with those kind of overriding themes of how mysterious he wants it, how then it's kind of like that's how we start the previs. And he said he wants it to happen at night, so we made sure that all of our renders of the surface of the Earth were over the night surface, and so there's minimal light And so that's kind of how we start marching through it, and then we jump from scene to scene, and really it's like, you know, starts off with a quick conversation with Roland. Again, each and every scene, it's, you know, he gives us kind of the purpose of the scene, and we start going through the iterative process of doing previs. The Aspen chase is probably our biggest CG environment, as far as the most extensive when it comes to the effects work that's going to need to be done. Because first of all, we're going to have to build Aspen digitally. There's no way that we are going to shoot some plates, but there's no way that you could actually do practically what we're about to do, which is basically not just tear Aspen apart, but tear the mountains around it. The big thing with this movie is scale. It's like, you know, how do we kind of keep keep it to the viewer can actually comprehend what's happening, but then also try to create scale. I mean, we're dealing with, you know, planet-sized problems here. He kind of starts with a premise, and then the process is exploring the what if of it all, and but he still keeps the human element to it, but he makes it so big. It's something that you would never have a chance to see unless a director like him decided to make a movie like this. We're going to see visuals that we would never see.
In the first meetings with Roland, the first thing and utmost what he wanted is he wanted the actors to be able to do their own stunts. He wanted to be able to get into their characters and do their own stuff. So he really wanted everything to be them. So with effects being there at the first meeting, we were able to talk about certain things of what we wanted to get done and how we could achieve some of these kind of like huge, epic kind of stunt sequences. All the actors had stunt doubles, but the stunt doubles never really got on the stage. They did all the testing, they did all the rehearsing, they did the camera setups, but then the actors had to go in and perform, and all the actors performed magnificently. What was probably the most challenging was actually some of the space flight in the 0G, because a lot of the other stuff, the physical stunts, was able to be done. We knew it all, we could do it all practical, but the space stuff, the 0G, we really wanted to kind of get it right. And so also in the first initial meeting as well with Guillaume and Roland, we talked about really not trying to invent anything new to achieve 0G. So we were going to go back to using a lot of the old style systems, and Guillaume wanted to develop a motion travel kind of system where they are kind of able to travel lengthwise up and down and rotate using some small gimbals. I was so impressed with John Bradley and his work ethic, and because we had a double for him for when the big tidal wave crashes through the hotel, but once that he was blown to the back, we pounded John with wave after wave, and he was just a trooper, like in this water tank. And then he had to do all his 0G stuff in the spaceship. When gravity is pulling people up, we collaborated with Guillaume in the sense that he was going to take care of flying barbecues and tents and that, and I was going to fly, and my rigging team were going to fly the human elements, so all the stunt people. So basically through talking with visual effects and talking with Roland, we just needed to get to know what angle of trajectory we wanted the people to fly in. The big scene where the tidal wave comes in through the hotel lobby, Guillaume and his effects team had made these two 4,000-gallon dump tanks that were rigged at the front of the stage. And so basically on action, he could dump 8,000 gallons of water at one time, which came in and blasted through the doors. So if you can imagine 8,000 gallons, I know my swimming pool at home is 10,000 gallons. So I could just imagine that volume of water coming through a lobby. It comes through with such a force. So those dump tanks really gave that scene and sequence a legitimate peril, I guess you could say, especially for John Bradley's character. The big car chase sequence, I'm going to have to give props to special effects on this. They developed a system where the car rides on a rig that's kind of like air hockey. So you could basically manually move these cars around by hand because they're floating on polished concrete. And then on the machines, they kind of have vibrators to make the cars go up and down, and boom, if they hit a jump, and then come back down. So manually, with poles on the sides, his effects team was able to bring the cars, crack them together, make one come up, come in behind. And this way, the actors are actually able to drive their own vehicles, lean out the window, fire, gunfight, you know. So it made everything totally safe for the actors, so there was no need for any stunt doubles. It's fantasy meets disaster meets heroes. So there's heroes in the thing, there's bad guys, there's villains, there's epic space. So I think it's a wild ride right from the beginning of the movie right till the end. So for people that like roller coasters, this is the movie for them.
My name is Bjarni Tryggvason. I was a former astronaut and flew on the space shuttle about 20 years ago. And I'm here basically as a consultant looking at some of the operations that they are using here in making this film, operations of the space shuttle. And then some guidance about the kind of language they would use and how they move about. Well, it's through actually another fellow who, ex-Air Force pilot who does air shows, and I do air shows, and so we meet every now and then, so I met him. And he acted as a consultant with these guys on the movie Midway, bringing his expertise as a fighter pilot into that. And they asked him if he could do this, and so he suggested, no, I should do it, because he doesn't know much about the shuttle. So he called me about a week and a half ago and said, hey, you want to go help these guys out, because they need someone with expertise in space and space operations and shuttle operations. So that's how I came about. So it's been a pretty interesting project so far. Well, I actually flew as a payload specialist back in 1997 on the Discovery, Shuttle Discovery, back in STS-85 was the mission number. And then after that, and that flight was focused on doing science on the space shuttle, some of which I actually helped design. And then after that, I went through the mission specialist training, both for the space shuttle and the space station. But then a couple of years later, I kind of bailed out of it because my kids were kind of needing some of my time, so I didn't do a second flight. Anyhow, but I did a 12-day mission on the Space Shuttle Discovery. And then I've also been involved in designing science hardware. Some is flown on the Russian space station, some on the space shuttle, some is up on the current space station. And then I also design currently some essentially educational experiments in science, and they're flown on the space station basically once every year and a half or so. There's several areas. First is when you look at these cockpits and you see all these switches back here in the mid-deck here, and then in the front part of the cockpit, there's like a few hundred switches and things. So every now and then they're looking to throw a switch for something. And so I give them advice on where that kind of switch might be and what they do with it. And so they can just go naturally do something that actually is the right kind of a switch. So that's one of the things I'm doing. The other thing is when people are moving around floating freely inside your spacecraft, you tend to move very gently and drift around a lot. The motions that we have when we're walking around the ground don't really replicate what happens when we're in this free-falling environment or free-floating environment inside the spacecraft. So I kind of coach the actors on how they should do some of their motions so it looks closer to what you would see the astronauts actually doing if they're inside their spacecraft. And then the dialogue, I've helped a little bit with just changing the dialogue here and there, just to bring some of the terminology kind of in line with real shuttle operations and how they would interact with each other. There's a very sort of strict protocol we use in the dialogue to make sure that communication is very clear and everybody understands it. So I've tweaked some of the dialogue working with Roland and Harald, the writers and the director, just to tweak that dialogue so it's just more in line kind of with how people would actually communicate in the spacecraft. I've had the script for a couple of weeks now. They sent it to me a couple of weeks ago. And I've been through it in all the scenes, and then all the places where there is either an action, a switch throw of some kind, or a dialogue, either between them. For instance, when somebody's in the cargo bay or doing something, the dialogue is such that you want to avoid any mistakes. So we treat the dialogue to kind of line up with that. And then looking at the actions they're taken, in all the places where a bit of knowledge about how things actually happen in space, I've looked at that, and I've sat down with Harald Kloser, the main writer, and talked a little bit with Roland about, well, how would you really do this, and what would you really say? And so some of the dialogue that we're actually hearing is dialogue where I have helped them tweak the dialogue to be more in line with really how it would be in a real shuttle operation. Okay, the first thing is there is no such thing as zero gravity. This is a real misnomer and sort of a misunderstanding of what's going on. And I've had engineers and physicists talks that I've given make the same mistake. One time I was giving a talk, and there was a physics professor, and he said the same thing, there's no gravity in space. And I said, well, how then does the space shuttle or the space station stay in orbit around the Earth? The gravitational acceleration at the height of the space station, or where the shuttle flies, is 90% of what it is here. It's only diminished 10%. And if you didn't have that, you wouldn't stay in orbit. And so when you're floating inside there, it's not because there's no gravity. It's because you, inside the space shuttle, say, are in the same kind of orbit as the space shuttle. And so you are continually traveling around the Earth because of the gravitational acceleration, but you're basically following each other very closely. And so one compared to the other looks like they're floating, but they're actually both accelerating at a very high rate. It's really quite amazing because it's so easy to move around inside the spacecraft. You just put the slightest little push off a wall, and you'll just float over until you come into another wall when you have to stop yourself. And so that's part of what I coach the astronauts, or the actors I should say here. They're moving from one side to the other side. It's not like they walk over like we do, okay? It's just a little push, drift, and stop yourself. Or if you're rotating, you're gonna push, you rotate until you stop yourself. And so you end up with a little bit of change in your speed, say your motion, and then a constant drift until you stop yourself. So those are the things that I'm kind of showing them or coaching them on, so that the motions we see are in the camera are very similar to what you would expect to see inside with astronauts inside the space shuttle. Part of it is you have to sort of stop making your legs your main way of moving around, because up there your legs don't do you any good because you're not in contact with the floor. And so you use your hands a lot, and then you do things very gently. And every time you push one way with the hands, well, then you got to push the other way to stop yourself after a little while. So just getting them to have that in mind as they're doing their movements that they have to do as part of the scenes for the movie, as you have that in mind, then it becomes more realistic. It comes closer to what you would see happening if you're watching an astronaut floating around inside the space station. So those kind of things, that's really part of what it is I'm helping them come to kind of understand. It's about 1/6 the size of the Earth. It's actually, I guess, about the size of the United States if you actually look at it silhouetted against the U.S. Its gravitational field is about 1/6 of the Earth. So if you're bouncing around the moon, you would take sort of bigger, seemingly slow motion steps as you bound across. And if you look at videos of the Apollo astronauts, you see that's what they do. And it's because the gravitational acceleration is so much less on the moon than on the Earth. So if you push yourself up, you can go a little higher, and it takes you a little longer to come back down. So they kind of bounced around. That was the easy way to move. And that depends on the mass of the moon, of course. And the mass of the moon is 1/6 of the Earth, and so you end up with, it's actually a little less than 1/6 of the Earth, but you end up with 1/6 of the gravitational acceleration. A lot of people don't have the same science background that I might have, and so they come up with some explanation that kind of fits what they're able to think about and kind of their view of the world. And unfortunately, we see a lot of strange explanations. Yeah, I've met quite a few people in talks I've given who think that the landings on the moon were all a hoax. Well, I used to share an office with John Young, who did 2 trips to the moon, one around the moon. I think it was Apollo 9 or 10 or something like that. And then he was one of the guys that went, I think it might have been Apollo 14 or 15, drove the moon buggy around. Well, I shared an office with this guy. I've met Buzz Aldrin, I've met Neil Armstrong, Harrison Schmitt. Like, I've met half the people that walked on the moon, and I have flown around the world 189 times in the space shuttle. But there are still people that think, and one wonders why, that the world is flat and it's all a hoax. It's kind of a little bit baffling as to why people think that, given all of what we know about the Earth, about the solar system, about the universe. So it's a bit strange. So exactly why people think that, I don't know. What's really impressive is you have a large team of people here, a couple hundred people, and they can go from one set to the next set pretty quick, when you look at the big changes, and they all work really well together. There's very little debating back and forth and talking back and forth. Everybody seems to know what they're supposed to do and when they need to do it and get on and do it. And then there's some fine tuning with the chatting, but it's really neat to see this team of people working on this project, bringing it together. And it kind of reminds me of how we operate the space shuttle, the space station. The astronauts are on board in space, but there's a big team of people on the ground in mission control and all the engineering teams behind them. And the astronauts never do anything without coordinating and talking with people on the ground. And again, you get the same thing. This big team of people, they all know their job, they're all very good at it, and it flows really, really well. And the communication from the people in orbit on the station or the space shuttle is very sort of crisp, very clearly defined terms, and everybody understands them. And you kind of hear that when Roland, say, is given the people directions on how he wants a shot done. It's very little words describe, this is what I need, and he has his jargon, and the people understand it, and they do it. So you see that same kind of team effort that works so cohesively and makes this large team of people produce all these shots and ultimately the movie.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and comment on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to be notified when new videos are released.